Hi, I'm Dos and this is the DBG channel. Today's video is on a slightly different tack altogether. When we produce our content for YouTube, we generally tend to assume a certain level of knowledge, and I'm not necessarily sure that's the right thing to do. This has been thrown into sharp focus for me recently because, as covered in one of our previous videos, there's a lot of people who are dealing with rat infestations, and a lot of them are coming to us for their first air gun. And I've had to go through the motions of explaining the difference between the main types of air rifles quite a number of times. So I figured there was probably some mileage in doing a video to cover this. So what we're going to do today is exactly that. To illustrate the differences between the main types of guns, we're going to use some regulars on this channel, which will be the Remington Express Synthetic, still freely available, the SMK QB78, the XS version, still lots of those available too, please get in touch, and my own personal Air Arms S410. Okay. The main different types are spring piston air guns, CO2 rifles, and pre-charged pneumatics or PCPs. Amongst newbies and people without experience, there seems to be quite a bit of confusion about the differences between CO2 and PCPs, and terminology gets a bit muddled for people with those as well. So we'll try and clear up any little confusion there as we go through. To start off with, we'll look at spring piston air rifles. Good, old-fashioned, simple. These are what most people, if you say air rifle, that's what they'll conjure up in their mind. And one of the great advantages with these is the only thing you need to add to this package is pellets. As you'll see as we go through the other types, there are some slight extra considerations for those, but we'll cover those when we get there. So, with your spring piston air gun of whatever type, you'll get various different loading mechanisms, but most of them will be a lever of some type. With a brake barrel like this, you break the barrel open and then pull it down until the trigger engages and the safety catch pops out if it has one. Pop your pellet in whilst holding onto the barrel, close it back up again, and you're ready to shoot. The other thing to consider with spring piston guns is they do recoil, so there is recoil to master, and unlike powder burning guns, it's not a single motion recoil. It's a sort of multi-part recoil, because you have a backwards element, a forwards element, and then that gets repeated to a lesser degree. And at some point in amongst all that movement, the pellet leaves the barrel. That might make it sound like it's virtually impossible to shoot one of these accurately. It really, really isn't. It's just a matter of practice and holding the gun as lightly as possible. The less you try and stop it moving, the more consistent that recoil is going to be, and the easier it is going to be to manage. So spring piston air guns, it's a standalone device. For as long as you've got pellets, you can shoot it. There are no other considerations to keep it running. In terms of upkeep and basic maintenance, the springs and seals inside last a very long time. And if you've got blued metalwork like this one has, a quick wipe over with a lightly oiled cloth at the end of each shooting session will keep your bluing in nice condition and safe from the acids and oils in your skin, any rainwater or blood from vermin or anything like that, and it'll keep your bluing nice. So that's spring piston air guns. The next type to talk about is the ones that are run on CO2. Most of us will be familiar, even from outside the world of air guns, with the little capsules that you use for inflating bicycle tyres if you have a puncture, or what your soda stream runs on if you have one of those, or if you're old enough to remember those. And in airgun terms, there are two main types in use. One is the 88-gram bulk fill, which not a lot of guns use, and they can be quite wasteful. The one that's generally used is the 12-gram capsule, which look like these. and they are a very cost-effective way of charging a gun. Most of the full power rifles will run 2 of these, and that will give you, depending on the rifle and the power it's set at, usually around about 65 to 70 shots at a usable hunting power. The rifle we're going to look at to illustrate what I'm talking about with these is the good old QB78, can be branded SMK, Beeman, etc. And these are, as you know from our ratting video, if you've seen it. If you haven't, then please search it out. It's quite informative. These are really decent quality, fantastically accurate, and the benefits, which is what we're going to touch on now with these, because of the CO2 power plant, they are recoilless. Now, that is a massive boon because it means you can shoot it off a tripod or rest it on a windowsill or a back of a chair, or wherever you're shooting from. If there's a solid support, you can rest this gun on it without any fear of it bouncing around. That's something that you absolutely can't do on a spring gun. If you need to rest a spring gun, you need to pop your hand between the gun and whatever it is you're resting on, because that will then mimic how you would hold it freehand, and that allows that same freedom of movement while it's recoiling to not affect the point of impact. With these CO2 guns, obviously that doesn't matter because you haven't got any recoil to deal with. That can help to make them, they're not necessarily more accurate, it's just a lot easier to access that accuracy. Obviously there are many different designs of these type of guns. These ones are a single shot bolt action, so you pop the bolt back, pop your pellet in, close the bolt, and away you go. The possible negatives of these are obviously you have to have a supply of CO2 capsules to keep these running. They're not hideously expensive, and the larger bulk you buy them in, usually the better prices you get. So typically they can be priced anywhere between sort of 50p to £1 per capsule, depending again what sort of bulk you're buying them in. The other thing to consider with CO2 is, as any of you, if you've ever used a CO2 fire extinguisher, will know this. If you hold onto the wrong bit while it's discharging, it gets very, very cold indeed. As CO2 expands, it goes cold, and as the temperature goes down, the power also goes down a little as well. So if you use a CO2 gun in cold weather, like really cold weather, its power will be appreciably lower than it would be in warm weather. Also, because the actual discharging of the CO2 pulls temperature down as well, if you fire shots in quick succession, you'll get a gradual tail off as you go along. This is more noticeable with the blowback repeating replica pistols and stuff, because you can fire shots off as quick as you can pull the trigger, and you can audibly hear them coming down in power if you fire really quickly. Whereas with a bolt action hunting gun like this, the simple action of getting ready for the next shot provides enough of a time for the temperature to stabilise, so that generally speaking your shots are going to be pretty consistent. With these particular QB and XS78s, I tend to get 60 to 70 shots at full power, and you will audibly hear them tail off when it gets to the end of the power supply, and up to that point the actual drop off is quite gradual. The valving system in these do seem to work really quite well. So these are CO2 guns or gas guns, and they are like the middle ground, if you like, between spring guns and what we're going to move on to next, which is pre-charged pneumatics. Now, to illustrate the PCPs, we've got my Air Arms S410 here. I've never seen that on a few videos. Again, terminology-wise, there has been a bit of confusion with people I've spoken to, and people have referred to these as gas guns. And in a sense, I suppose it is right, because oxygen is a gas. But these are quite a bit different from the CO2 guns that we've just been looking at. So the CO2 guns, terms of pressure they run, it's usually around about 800 psi, something like that. Most PCPs will run in the 200 to 300 bar pressure range, which is, loosely speaking, sort of 2000 to 3000 psi. Obviously, that's appreciably more than the gas pressure that's inside the CO2 guns. With PCPs, you have all the advantages of the CO2 gun in that it's recoilless. You don't have to worry about resting it on things, etc., etc. Accuracy is, on anything with a decent barrel, the accuracy is going to be better than you are, generally speaking. And because it's recoilless like the CO2 guns, that accuracy is actually quite easy to access, certainly a lot easier than the spring gun, as we mentioned before. With the actual filling of these, obviously when we look at the CO2 gun before, you buy the capsules pre-filled. You've got a little capsule there that actually holds the pressure in it. That gets pierced when it goes in the gun, fills the pressure chamber of the gun, and you fire that until it runs out, effectively. The ongoing expense with that obviously is the purchase of those CO2 capsules. However, with the PCPs, that is a little different. These run on breathing quality oxygen at a very high pressure, as you mentioned, 2000 to 3000 psi. To help you visualize how high that is, a typical road car will have 30 to 40 psi in the tyres. And if you've ever seen one of those blow off a rim or get dramatically punctured, you'll know that can sound like quite a lot of pressure if one of those just goes off, pop. So imagine that times 100, and you've got what's sitting inside one of these. Obviously, you have to have a means of getting compressed air into these, and that compressed air has to be dry. There are a number of ways of doing that. Chiefly, you'd be looking at what most people end up with is one of these, which is an oxygen bottle or diver's tank, and you will go to a specialist to go and get those filled. Typically it's £4 or £5 or whatever to fill one of those up, and they come in sort of 3 litre, 7 litre and 10 litre sizes, something like that. And depending on what gun you're filling, you'll quickly work out how many shots you get out of each fill from your diver's tank before the pressure in your diver's tank drops to below the pressure you need to put in the gun, at which point you need to go and get it filled up again. So that's one option for filling. Obviously they're quite expensive. They're sort of £200-ish for the diver's bottle, and then you have the ongoing expense of getting them topped up. And for a lot of people, that also means travelling to somewhere to get them topped up. The other sort of high-end option for filling a pre-charged pneumatic would be a compressor. These come in a variety of types, qualities and prices, and capacity levels. But a rough idea, something like the one I've just shown you in the picture, they're about £400 to £500, something like that, and they'll fill up to 600cc. So most buddy bottle guns would be fillable from one of those. It has a very efficient moisture trap in it because it pulls air from the oxygen. It's filtered in the machine itself, and then it's filtered inline also. So the air that actually goes into the gun is completely dry. This is really important because if you get moisture inside the gun, if it's got a steel cylinder, obviously that can corrode inside the cylinder and can weaken the cylinder over time. And even if your gun doesn't have a steel cylinder, there's a lot of brass componentry inside PCPs, and I have opened up so many PCPs and found all the brass bits in there corroded, sometimes to the extent that they actually lift the firing valve seats off and cause all sorts of problems. So it really must be dry air. Can't make that point often enough. And the cheapest means of filling a PCP with the air you need, and it's certainly not effort-free, is a manual stirrup pump like this. Again, needs an inline filter for exactly the same reason. There is a technique to using these, but however you go about it, it's a good workout. So that covers the different types of apparatus you would need to fill your gun. Oh, didn't mention price on the stirrup pumps. Stirrup pumps are 150 to 200 quid, plus the cost of an inline filter if they don't come with one. So we've run through the main types of gun and pros and cons for each of them. Hopefully that has cleared up any confusion that some people might be having. If I've missed anything or there's anything else you would like answered, then please get involved in the comments below. Hopefully that's been of interest to you all, and we'll see you all again soon.